Good morning, USA. What's up, Mino?
What's a guan popcorn?
Oh man, we just over
Hey, good
here.
morning, everybody. Good morning. Wait, it's afternoon. What are we saying good morning about?
You so right. Welcome to Rabbit Hole Roundtable Talks, the show where we take a topic and we deep dive into it and we go wherever it takes us. Today we're gonna be talking about the novel Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, one of Mino's, I think, top one authors of all
Top
time.
one.
Top one, yeah, okay. So Mino likes to spoil things. So if anybody feels a spoiler happen, spoiler alert, just to start off right here. Um, I'd like to say that we're starting to get some traction on our audio format, which is really good. Our video format is also doing really well. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Please like, comment, subscribe, and we're gonna keep the chat open so that we can talk to you guys as we go throughout this. Make sure that you're listening live, and let's hop off.
All right. So for a long time, I've been trying to get Wanted to read any book that I've read because I read a lot of different books, and I always feel like I want someone to talk about it with English, second language. Alright. So I finally got him to look at Kindred. I think he actually got interested from looking at the summary of the book. Is that what happened?
I heard a summary on YouTube actually, and I read something that sparked my interest.
Yeah. So that was good because I hadn't read that book yet either, and I do plan on reading all her books at some point.
Actually, you didn't want to read
So
this book at all.
yeah, I didn't want to read it. I mean, I was gonna read this one like the last. This was gonna be the last book of hers I read because I was like, I feel like this book gonna trigger me. Like I feel like it's gonna spark something in me that gonna just make me angry and like ruin my day.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to read it. But then when you was like, I'm going to read it, I was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna read it just because I want us to talk about other books. And maybe if I read this one with you,
Mm-hmm.
then I could get you to read a next one that's gonna be lighter that I will enjoy more. So an investment, you know what I'm saying?
But did you end up enjoying
Um,
this one at all?
I actually did enjoy it. I actually did. It didn't trigger. I mean, one scene specifically really did trigger me,
Uh-huh.
but overall, it didn't really like trigger me. It was just like, yeah, this is kind of like what I expected in a
Uh-huh.
way.
Uh-huh.
Or like I more viewed it as social commentary. Like she was giving social commentary on the black experience,
Mm.
but she was doing it through her writing.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I viewed it.
So I think we should give a light synopsis of the entire book
All right,
without
you
going
do
into
your
too
thing.
much detail. Me, okay. So
Because if I do it, I'm going to give too much detail. I'm
uh,
gonna still give my synopsis, but I'm
mm.
gonna try my best not to spoil.
Well, from my point of view, the book is about a young lady. She's what, 26, who goes back in time randomly to save her great great grandfather, who takes consent from her great great grandmother. I'm trying not to say the trigger words because there's a lot of trigger warnings here in this episode, and I don't want anybody to feel anyway. But she has to save his life to basically save her own life. So the book takes her through some very challenging times where she has to decide, why am I even doing this at certain times? Like, why am I letting him live when I know what he's gonna do? But in order for her to continue on, for her life to continue on, she basically has to do this. And it also brings to light things like interracial marriage and what the slaves had to go through. And from my point of view, it really touched on a lot of different aspects that we still face today. So the most of the questions and topics that we have today are gonna be, I feel they're gonna branch through time, speaking of back then and to now. And we can still see that change happened, but I have a strong feeling now that I've had before I read the book that the people who were around back then trying to create change, they actually thought change is gonna happen. Like it's gonna happen soon. And I feel like if they came to the future today, they'd be like, where's the change? Which is a segue I want to make, and I know it's sounding like MK right now, but there's a series on CW called the 4400. I don't know if you heard about it. It's where all these disenfranchised, marginalized people from the past come to the future. Give it a look. It's pretty decent. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Sounds interesting. So my synopsis of the book is this lady um, who has white ancestry, but who is dark skinned. I understood that she was dark skinned. She travels back in time against her will to save his life, to save the life of her great, 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 whatever ancestor he is, grandfather. Um, and she goes back like several times, I think like maybe four times.
Mm-hmm.
And each time, well, okay, giving too much information, but she goes back four times. And each time she has to like basically assimilate into slave culture
Mm-hmm.
as a person who's from the modern times who is free and is like kind of like when she went back in time acting white
Mm-hmm.
um, while being a slave and how that plays into how people treated her, how much trouble she got into, and even how people interacted with her and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of that is part of the story of even modern times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's my synopsis. I think if I say anything else, I don't give too much.
That was actually pretty good. So I guess we could start with like it's like a jarring-ish question. Like, think about yourself. If that was you, how long would you survive in the past? Do you think?
So if I was in her shoes or like just going back to the past.
It's just going back to the past. How long would you survive? How long do you think you survive? And like, do you think you know enough about history and about back then to survive? And what skills do you think that you would have from now to take back then? And that's why I didn't want to form these questions to be too vague because then it doesn't say like when.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's say if
I
you
can
were,
just go. I'll go with the time frame that she went back to.
yep, yep, yep.
Because I was thinking like vague, like, oh man, what if I go back to prehistoric times, or
Mm-hmm,
what if I go
mm-hmm.
back to like just when I was born?
Yeah,
And I was like, let's just stick with that because
yeah. Let's keep the theme as this theme.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I don't think I would survive. I think I would survive for like a day or
Wow.
two,
Mm-hmm,
no more than a week for sure. Like either I would survive because I would just assimilate,
mm-hmm,
like how she had to, or I would die because I would say or do the wrong thing at the to the wrong person at the wrong
mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
Like she was kind of lucky to who she got sent back to,
Mm-hmm.
but she could have gotten sent back to a slave master who was really evil or just really didn't see slaves as people at all.
I mean, these didn't really see that as people per se.
They saw them as okay. In my opinion, they saw them as people, but people that was below them
Mm.
and people that they had the responsibility of making them behave. That's how I kind of viewed it.
Well, the way the book was written, to be fair, she didn't really go back to the adults. Went back to a child, and she did acts that helped her be more favorable to the adults. So the adults kind of knew if she's here,
Yeah, yeah,
he's in trouble. Like we kind of need her, but she's
yeah.
still
That's
she's
true.
still black, so she's still treated like a slave. But
That's
overall, the
true.
slaves were treated decently. I agree with you, though.
Yeah, overall his slaves were treated decently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like she could have got sent back to a slave master who like literally skinned slaves alive and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
luckily she wasn't sent to someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on who I get sent back to. If I get sent back to a slave master who's like that guy in the book,
Mm-hmm.
I might stand a chance of surviving.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, I wouldn't have the advantages she had where I saved somebody's life, so now they want to protect me or whatever.
Yeah.
So I probably would get beat a lot more than she did. Next thing too, we have to think, and this kind of relates to something else later on that we're going to talk about, which is
Mm-hmm.
colorism,
Mm-hmm.
is that I'm light skinned. So maybe I might stand a chance of not having to be out in the fields. I might be inside the house
Mm-hmm.
or in the kitchen or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But I think personally, I don't know enough about history at all. Like, if I was trying to escape up north,
Yeah.
I would die in the forest. Like, I can't even hunt. Like,
Oh my gosh.
I will eat the wrong plant. I'm gonna drink from the wrong stream.
Th-
Something.
mm,
So
I feel like that's just ignorance. That's not really your fault per se.
yeah, which is why when I have kids, I gonna make sure that they go into some kind of like Eagle Scouts or something to learn how to do those things, so I
Mm-hmm.
could learn secondhand.
And I feel
The
like us as a people, we kind of look down on, not really, not, I won't say look down on that. We're more shy away from that kind of things like camping or hunting and even, survival skills. We kind of like, we don't really like it. I don't know how to describe it, but you know what I mean? Like,
You mean black people or like
yeah,
humankind?
yeah, they don't do things like, they don't enjoy camping and hunting and things like that when it's just like an experience you can have and it'll help you out.
Yeah, it's weird that black people don't do those things
Mm-hmm.
because, as you know, our white counterparts, they do those. A lot of them that I know do those things,
Mm-hmm.
and they do it for fun. I think part of it is that we feel like we already have a hard life. We don't really want to do things that's gonna be hard for
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Yeah.
So I can understand why we don't do it, but I think we should really think about it a different way, which is these are like skills that we have to learn in case
Mm-hmm.
of something that, which is how I think because I'm a paranoid person. Like I need to learn these different things in case something happens
Yeah.
and I need to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I wouldn't survive for long. And I don't think I would survive for long, and I don't know enough about history, so that's my answer.
I think I would live until I died. Probably.
That's vague.
Well, I'm gonna get into it. Like,
All right.
well, I would survive. But I'll survive until I died or until they beat me to death. I know I have a smart mouth, so that's already number one. I don't like BS, so that's number two. But I already have a demanding job physically and mentally, so I know like the work part wouldn't be that bad, and I would definitely be outside for sure. It's okay though. It's okay. You gotta go. You gotta go. But I don't know enough about history to be placed in a good place to like survive in the like I don't know where to go. I don't know what's a free state. I don't know, but I know north is better. But I don't know how to get there, what to avoid. And this book really has some things that come to the future. I don't know if you talk about this now, but I'll put a note here that when the main character was working after some time when she went back, another slave told her, "Don't work too hard because then they expect that every day." And I was like, I work all the time.
Yes, dude. You know what that made me think of?
Yo.
When I was working at Subway,
Mm-hmm.
bruh. When I was working at Subway, right? I would go into like that was my first job, like my real first job,
Mm-hmm.
like ever in life.
Yeah.
So I went into work every day, working hard, and people would be in there working, taking a bunch of breaks, going to smoke, working slow,
Mm-hmm.
doing jobs like not correct, so then they have to redo it over and over again. And I in there like doing everything, like trying to be perfect, going as
Mm-hmm.
fast as I can, all that kind of stuff. And it always like peeved me when my reward was,
More
okay, Fian,
work.
here's more work. Like here is 10 more tasks for you to do
Oh
since you finished
man.
those previous five.
Mm-mm-mm.
And I'm like, wait, I am a 50 task and this person's still on his third task.
Mm-hmm.
How is that fair? Like, y'all ain't paying me more than them.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, they were making more than me because they've been working there longer. Y'all not paying me more than them, and you gave me more work.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that really reminded me because it was, I don't want to spoil, but can you tell us like what happened when like why she prompted her to do it? Like to tell her like, hey, don't work so hard.
The overseer that she had was one that was really hard on people just for no reason. So he just do things for no reason just to make you work. But even though he was doing that, the slave was like, just take it because then you have to do more work, and then everybody have to come to your standard of work as well. So she was like, oh, and I don't know if it clicked for her. I don't know if these same things that they talked about then happened to her because she had a different kind of job. She didn't have like a physical laborious job where you get rewarded for what you did. But yeah, that song to me, I was like, wow, because it still happens.
Yeah. I think too, so I read another one of Octavia's books
Mm-hmm.
where she was a textile person or something. Like she was writing about a textile person.
Mm-hmm.
And a similar theme came up there as well.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think that Octavia puts herself in a lot of these books. For instance, the main character in this book is a writer,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and Octavia is a writer.
Mm-hmm.
So in this other book that I'm talking about, the girl. Oh, I actually have the quote. I could read it from my phone. So I actually took a screenshot and sent it to my family, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "This is real life right here."
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Let me see. Let me see. Where is my favorite uncle at? Oh, there he is. Oh wait, maybe I didn't share it. Dang, I posted it on Facebook. But anyway, basically, she was saying that when she worked hard,
Mm-hmm.
like when she worked too fast, other employees got angry at her
Yeah.
because she was raising the bar too high.
Mm-hmm.
But then when she worked too slow, the overseer or her supervisor
Yeah.
would um, dock her pay for not getting enough done. While
Dang.
everybody else would like her, like all her other colleagues and stuff would like her, but
Mm-hmm.
then her supervisor would get on her back.
Yeah.
And the reverse was true when she worked fast. Her supervisor would love her, but everybody else would get on her, all her colleagues would get on her back. And
Mm-hmm.
then she was also saying, like, she hadn't even been given a raise in over 2 years.
That's
So it
wild.
was like she don't even know what to do. Like work hard and everybody hate me and
Mm-hmm.
still don't get a raise, or work slow and then have my supervisor be on my back and like docking my pay and stuff.
Yeah. Is that fair that drives you to choose either one?
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like the carrot and stick approach to how you people do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is like I'll reward you with whatever, but if you do bad, I'll beat you. And I feel like that's what slavery was overall. It was like carrot and stick.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. So let's skip to 4 and
Okay.
talk about why this book worked based on went back and just not where but who went back. So in the book, the black main character goes back by herself first. And I think the second time she goes back, her husband goes with her, and her husband happens to be white. I didn't know this until they said it, which is some good writing right there.
Yeah, same. I
So
actually assumed her husband was black because of the very first scene.
yeah, yeah,
I don't
exactly.
want to I don't want to spoil it.
But I feel personally that it worked because he's a white man, and back in that time, white men were at the top, so you could talk to anybody like levelly, and they would actually respect you as a person as a white man. And her being a black woman, of course, that was his property, so they wouldn't try to take her, beat her without having to, things like that. And even when they did beat her, she didn't want to tell him because she didn't want him to react and get her in more trouble, which is wild. But
Yeah.
they couldn't even be husband and wife back then because that didn't happen back then.
But on the other hand, even though they couldn't be husband and wife, what was condoned was her going to his room every night for relations,
Hmm.
and that was condoned.
Yeah.
So it was like, y'all good enough. And I feel like that's still kind of a pervasive thing in modern times as well. Is
Hmm.
like, I wouldn't date you, but I'll
Yeah.
fornicate with you.
Yeah.
And people have that thought. I myself have had that thought
Hmm.
before as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's kind of cringe if you really think about it. Like, I don't like you enough to date you, but I like you enough to have intercourse with you.
Yeah. That's weird. So, what are your views on them going back together?
I would say that was actually one of my favorite parts.
Mm.
I would say though that I don't think that he left completely unscathed just because he was a white male,
Hmm.
because he didn't really fit into the time because his views are too progressive as well.
Yeah.
He didn't view slaves as property, and it showed.
Yeah. You could tell he
Um,
was an ally for the most part.
yeah, and man, now this made me want to talk about something else completely, which is like
You could
allies in modern time.
dabble and take notes.
Because like in modern times, you know how we have this thing where, is this person an ally? Is this white person an ally really, or are they just like trying to be woke?
Hmm.
I keep doing air quotes. I'm gonna stop because if you're audio only, you can't hear the air quotes. But if he's an ally,
Hmm.
is he actually an ally, or is he just trying to like somebody who's trying to be part of this wokeism that's happening nowadays?
Yeah.
where people are trying to like defend black people against stuff where we ain't even actually do that. Like, why you being all hype on our behalf? Like, let us.
Mhm.
If we have a problem with it, we'll let you know. You know, you
Mhm.
don't have to go inventing problems for us. But on the other hand, you might have allies, people who actually speak out. Like, if their family is racist, they talk to them and be like, "Hey, that's not okay."
Mhm.
Stuff like that. Um, so I don't know. I feel like her husband was somewhere in the middle because
Mhm.
at times he did come across as like he fit into the times, and then
Mhm.
other times he came across as he doesn't fit into the times,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. I don't want to spoil, but I could think of a couple of examples where he said something that made her like look at him like, what are you talking about? You know?
I feel like I think I know which one you're talking about. 'Cause you told me about it. I feel like he's not. He wasn't trying to be away, but he was. Since he is white, he can actually understand from the other point of view what's happening. Because
Yeah,
we wouldn't want to try to understand their point of view, but he actually could because he can see both sides. Well, he can see most of our side and more of the other side.
yeah, but that's a problem too in a way.
Hmm.
Um, is that he could see both sides, but he also can't fully understand the side that he's empathizing with.
Hmm.
And that's part of the problem because it's like, yeah, you aren't racist or you're less racist than, because I don't ever think people could be fully not racist, but
Hmm.
you're less racist than these people in this time.
Hmm.
But then some of the stuff you're saying shows that you lack that understand a full understanding of my situation. Because
Hmm.
you aren't out there getting beat for forgetting to say yes, sir,
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
So oh, what was the question? I forgot. Oh
No,
yeah, yeah.
we just talking about the time. We still good. We within boundaries.
Okay.
I want
So
to add to that and say that even though you could be of the same race, even then people have a lack of understanding of different situations and circumstances. So I feel like it starts here and it expounds, but I understand what you're talking about. No one can fully understand someone else's exact experience unless they went through the exact same thing. And that's why you have
mhm.
people that are less empathetic to black people while they themselves are black people, but that's a different topic that we'll get into later as well.
Oh man, you just hit another nail on the head, man.
I'm a carpenter, man. This is what I do.
Golly, the puns. Anyway.
So tell me what you feel like a black couple would look like.
Oh God, the guy will get killed almost immediately
Uh-huh.
because he gonna be trying to defend. If he's a guy who isn't a coward, he's more likely going to try and defend his woman.
Hmm.
If he's a guy who is more cowardly, he probably gonna just let whatever happen happen. Like I can't do nothing, and I gonna just let whatever happen happen.
Hmm.
Um, but I would like to assume that he would not be cowardly and he would try to defend her honor in some way.
Hmm.
So if something happened to her, like they go back, he gonna try to keep her alive at the
Hmm.
detriment to himself.
Yeah, I feel like that.
And then the woman, I feel that, and the problem with even thinking about all of this,
Hmm.
everything depends on skin color as well, like shade of skin.
Hmm.
So if they both light skin, maybe.
Yeah.
If they both dark skin,
Hmm.
the guy gonna die for sure, and the woman gonna probably get sent out to the fields.
Yeah.
And yeah. Oh well, if we go in the same context as a story,
Yeah.
I think the woman will probably have the same outcome as the main character in this story, but
Yeah.
the guy would have died.
Hmm. I feel like that
What
would
do
be
you think?
the end of the marriage, basically, because and as I have here in my notes, like it depends on your skin tone. So if the guy is darker and she's lighter, she gonna be inside, he'll be outside. And when she's coming back to the future, he's still outside because there's no way he gonna come inside the house. And if it's a reverse, it's the exact same thing. So it's like I feel like the characters in this story had a better chance of coming back together, even though they didn't. Spoiler alert. But
Wait.
what?
I think we have to, man. F the spoilers, man. Y'all gonna hear spoilers, okay?
Well, we're gonna have tidbits of little spoilers then. So when she comes back the second time, her partner gets left in the past for 5 years. So that's what I was alluding to. So That's what I'm saying. Like they wouldn't come back together because they don't go back together at all. It's her going back because it's her story, and he just held on with her the second time to go back with her. So a black couple would have a hard time. Let's just say they went back and nobody saw them at all, then they'll have a chance because you could be on the run and you could do what you gotta do. But if you going back in the middle of a town or a city, or you're on a farm, it's GG's, game over.
Yeah, I think the mechanism for how she went back in time and got back to the present
Hmm.
would have been a big problem there because even like the husband going back with her,
Hmm.
okay, fine. No matter what race you are, you gotta go back.
Hmm.
Now, coming back to the present, like you pointed out, that's gonna be hard
Yeah.
for a black male.
Hmm.
Like the only reason that her husband could have come back to the present time is because he had more freedoms than her and he could actually be around her whenever he wanted to.
Hmm.
But if you're a black male, there's no way. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess there is some way she could be running towards you or something and you could run
Yeah.
towards her.
Like if you both in the
And
field, you could just always work together. Like always work like one
mhm,
cutting bush ahead of each other.
you could work
Yeah.
nearer to each other
Yeah.
because they might even put you in different rows and who knows how big like is an acre.
Hmm.
Acre is pretty big.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think you might be right. Generally, the black guy gonna die because he probably gonna get left back
Hmm.
several times before they finally get to come back. Or if he does come back, he gonna be maimed by the time he come back
Yeah.
from all the beatings and torture and stuff that they was doing.
Yeah. And you could be sold. Each of them could be sold at any time. That's a
And
big
then
deal
that's
too.
just
Yeah,
GG.
that's
You
why.
never coming back.
Yeah, that's why I said. Like, if that happened, then you don't know how many times you'll get sold. You don't know where it can be. There's no
Yep.
GPS. There's no even getting a letter was.
Exactly. Oh
And
my gosh.
what letter? We weren't allowed to write, so you just
But he
stuck.
could. He could write, but he wouldn't be able to get the opportunity to write.
Yeah.
Damn. What about a white woman and a black man?
Oh no, no, no. That's definitely GG's for him. Cause imagine just him holding on to her because they're both scared is a death sentence right there.
That might be a death sentence for her too,
Depending on the people that find them, yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But
crazy.
the story would have played out completely different though.
Because back then, women don't have as much say as men do. So, like, she can't even speak in his defense because they're not gonna listen, and that's a big
Yeah.
deal.
But I think overall the story would have played out different. Like she would
Yeah.
have keep coming back to save him, but it would have been like just come back. She would have never experienced any of the damage where
Hmm.
he would have felt like he needs to come back in time with her.
Yeah.
Because remember, part of the reason why he even came back in time with her was because he was trying to like help.
Hmm.
But if it was a white woman going back, he wouldn't feel a need to help. He would just be like, maybe they would just talk it out every time she come back. But he wouldn't feel a need to like try and
Yeah.
protect
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
because she's not really in any danger.
That's true. That's true. Hmm. What about a white couple?
I mean, this story wouldn't even make sense at that point.
Oh
They're just going
man.
back in time to relive some fun, I guess. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, that's true. That's true.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it two different ways. You
Hmm.
could have white people who are actually like aware of like racism and try to change like how they think about stuff
Hmm.
and treat people as human
Hmm.
beings rather than as a skin color. And then you
Yeah.
have white people who honestly don't care. Like
Yeah.
and that's just the middle. And then you have the extreme where you have white people who actually look down on black people
Yeah.
completely.
Hmm.
So you have those three different types. I think we should probably talk about each type and like what the experience would be like for them. Like for instance, if we have the ones who are like, I don't like to use the word woke, but the more woke one,
Hmm.
you think they would try and go back and like help slaves escape, or what do you think they would do?
Maybe if they were more empathetic, let's use that word empathetic, they could go back and try to make earlier changes, I guess, to laws and things that were put in place if they could, because they'll be a lot more educated because education grew as from then to now. They'll be a lot more educated, so they could actually write things that would sway the minds, probably end things earlier, probably help them escape because there were white people who helped blacks escape. So they'll probably be one of those houses where everybody hides underneath the basement overnight or whatever. So I think they would try their best to do something to be active in history. I think the husband, spoiler alert, he actually became one of those people that did these things. I think he was well known for it. Like even like in today, like he made an imprint on history.
Wow. Yeah, I agree. I think definitely if I was a white person and I had the same level of empathy that I do now,
Hmm.
and I went back in time, I would definitely use whatever abilities I had to affect change. So I can
Yeah,
see that. Or if you're like middle of the road where you're like you don't hate black people, but you also don't really care what happens to them.
I feel like maybe they would finally get to see like it'll be so visceral for them to actually see it happening that they would be pushed to the more empathetic side where they'll be like, wow, this happened for 400 years and like it barely got better. And they'll probably see the same connections that we're talking about today. And they'll be like, it's not really that much different from what it was back then. And then they would probably, again, get pushed over. You still muted.
Whoops. I said, yeah, I think I agree. Or on the flip side,
Mm-hmm.
maybe just to play devil's advocate, maybe they will go back and be like, man, this is the life. Like, I
Mm,
wish things had not changed. Like, I would love to just be at home all day doing absolutely nothing
mm-hmm.
and just have people take care of all my stuff and I don't even have to pay them.
That's true. That could happen. And I felt like we talked about this where I was concerned because this book had me on a roller coaster. I was concerned that actually her husband would like assimilate into it
I
like
thought that too.
complete. I was like, please don't,
Yep.
because that's something that could
I was
happen.
thinking that.
Most movies and shows where you go back in time, you have people that they remain the same, they become empathetic, or they actually fit in because it's part of who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I was worried about that too. I was like, damn, like I was worried, especially when he got left back for the 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, damn, when he come back, he did come back with an accent.
Yeah,
And by the way, the person who was reading the audiobook, they did a good job
yeah, I know. Oh,
of blending the
everybody.
accent. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
she did a good job because he had like they had people with a strong Southern accent, and then he had like a soft Southern accent. I don't know how they did that, but that was a good job.
Yeah. So,
Um,
well, then
but yeah,
that.
I thought that. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I thought that for sure after that 5 years, he would have had slaves or something,
Mm-hmm.
but luckily he didn't.
Yeah. So what I just said actually fits for the last group. They just assimilate into the culture back then because that's just
Yeah,
already their mindsets.
yeah. And it's crazy too because even uneducated people, like people who were like who we would consider dumb or poor nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
they owned slaves and was making bank
Yeah.
or at least decent money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, like, if you have slaves, it doesn't matter. You could be, oh, I want to say a political figure name,
Come
and
on,
I
man.
shouldn't do
Let's
that.
not do
But
this.
let's not do it.
Yeah.
But you could be dumb,
Mm-hmm.
white, and rich,
Mm-hmm.
and it just makes sense because you have literal slaves making money for you,
I don't
and you
want.
could make money.
No, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead. I thought you were done.
And you could make money off of slaves just having kids together, which is even more messed up.
Yeah. I was going to say that that's how most of them. I don't want to insult anybody's heritage, but that's how most of them were because they weren't really educated. They just inherited the farm or the plantation from their parents,
Hmm.
which is kind of weird. Like how, well, I like how society has changed. Well, back then, you didn't really have to do anything besides go to school, and then when you're done with school, you just inherit the plantation. So schooling back then was to get you ready to be that person. So you need to know at least math and how to write and how to read. But like
Yeah.
you didn't have to be extremely smart, and nobody expected you to be extremely smart because a lot of them were just inheriting things.
Yep.
based on heritage. That's what you call it. Yeah.
That's where the whole idea of generational wealth comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another concept that we need to talk about, which I don't ever hear about, and maybe I'm inventing,
Mm-hmm.
which is generational taxation, where basically you've been taxed in some way
Mm-hmm.
because you weren't able to, either you were being held back or you had boundaries or some whatever reason
Mm-hmm.
you weren't able to grow your own generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because generational wealth is compounded.
Yeah.
The more you have, the more you can obtain. Just like any rich person, you're already rich, so you can obtain more stuff that will
Mm-hmm.
make you more rich, and
Yep.
you
Yep.
just that process just keeps repeating. But if you're poor, just
Mm-hmm.
even getting into that first thing of ownership
Yeah.
is already hard. And then as people who like never had those things, we don't even recognize that we need to keep it and maintain it and pass it on. Like how much black people own a house, instead of passing it on to their kids for free, they
Mm-hmm.
either want to sell it to kids or sell it to somebody else because they need that money for retirement or whatever.
Yeah. That's
It's
true.
like,
I know the opposite is happening now, I believe, where people are getting taxed on money that they inherit once it's over a certain amount. So I don't, I feel like certain things come into play that people think help, but it doesn't really help anybody. Because doing that doesn't really
yeah,
affect anybody unless you have it.
right.
So what you're talking about is a very good idea. But then it's like, who do you give it to? Because everybody
Yeah.
could say that I didn't get this or I didn't get that, which is probably true for them.
Well, I know of someone who is going to pass on their house to their children, and all the children are going to equally own it.
Hmm.
Um, but it also depends on the individuals. So back in the past, normally when you pass on your, what do you call it, inheritance? I guess inheritance. When you pass on the thing that people are going to inherit,
Hmm.
um, you normally give it to the eldest,
Yeah.
which is also unfair in my opinion. But I'm the eldest, so I guess it doesn't affect me. But you normally pass it on to the eldest, right?
Yeah.
And then the eldest decides what to do with it.
Mm.
But you also usually invest a lot of stuff into the eldest as well to train them to take over or train them to make
Yep.
sure they keep it
That's what I was
in
talking
the
about.
family.
Yeah.
But I think in modern times, the person I know, they're passing it on. They're giving it to all three of their kids. They're
Hmm.
splitting it equally, and
Hmm.
then they're leaving it up to the kids to decide how they want to handle the property. Either they're going to rent it out, or they're going to give full ownership to only one of them, or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but that leaves room for greed, as we all know. People might be like, "Well, I'm the eldest, or I'm the person who lived on near the place longest, or whatever different reasons people could make up for why they should get sole ownership."
Well,
So,
to be devil's advocate again, I've known someone that's in a situation as well where their parents left them, they left all the kids everything equally.
mhm,
So everything is split down. The land is split into five, four. The estate split into four, which works because they're a decent group, so they have that. But then you have situations where I don't feel like it's fair for it to be equal. And let me explain. Because you could have, let's say you have three kids, and then you get old, and then two take care of you, and one leaves, and they never come around, they never come visit you, and things like that. But they only show up when inheritance time comes around because they know money's coming into play. And I feel like that's unfair to the other
yeah,
two and to you as a parent because risk basically your life to take care of them, and then in your time of need, they leave. So I feel like they should have clauses in there where things like closeness and time actually do come into play because they do matter in the long run.
yeah, I agree with that. I do think it's a little unfair if people who literally only come around from, actually that happened recently to another person I know,
Hmm.
where he was taking care of someone who wasn't even his family member,
Yeah.
because he's like a church man,
Hmm.
and the person that he was taking care of actually was his aunt, but like she was married into the family. She wasn't like his blood aunt,
Gotcha.
so he was taking care of his aunt. And her son, her only child,
Mm-hmm.
never took care of her,
Mm-hmm.
never was around. He left, never came back. Then when she died, she actually wrote in her will for the guy who was taking care of her to inherit all her stuff.
Yep.
And her son was upset by that because he was like, I'm her son. I should have that stuff, not you,
Yeah.
you know? But then the person who inherited was like, but I took care of your mom for like for so long. Like I
Yeah.
didn't even have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I only even took care of her because I knew that you wasn't doing it.
And he didn't
I
even
was
do it
taking
for
up,
the money.
yeah, and I wasn't doing it for any reason. I didn't
Yeah.
even know she was gonna leave me her land. So, like basically that kind of points out what you were saying. Like
Yeah.
it really should go to somebody who actually was in that person's life in some way.
Yeah.
But in the
Just have a
example,
clause or something.
yeah, in the example I was given though, I think all three of this person's children are in their life.
Okay.
Um, and I also don't think that they're gonna be like greedy or anything. Like, but you never know with people.
Yeah.
Often they're unpredictable.
Mm-hmm. That was a definitely rabbit hole in right there.
Yeah.
um. Okay. So I think I would like to go back in time with you, but probably not for this. But is there any people or person that you want to take back with you to this time in this book?
Hell no.
Yeah, that's my initial thought. Like, nah.
Yeah, if we're going back to this antebellum
Hmm.
slavery,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to take anybody back. I don't have enough white friends to say I won't take my white friend back so they could protect me. Like,
Okay.
plus I'm a black male. If I was
Hmm.
a black woman, then maybe I would take back a white male.
Hmm.
But as a black, I don't have any white male friends that I could think of
Mm.
who I know for sure that they would try and protect me,
Gotcha.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, I don't agree. I agree with the first part. Don't bring back anybody. But I do have white friends who I know would do their best for me and do right by me. So I think I'll be okay-ish, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah. And even if I went back with you, like we said before, different skin tones, so you're gonna be in the house and I'll be outside, like just waving to you and you be waving to me.
I gonna be
And
if
then
I go
as I wave, it's like blah. Oh, okay, let me get back to let me just get back to work, man.
uh,
I even
holy
tell my
shit.
friend hi.
I said
Golly.
we should I said we shouldn't laugh at this. But that's messed up.
Oh man.
I was imagining myself at the window like oh I'm gonna bring him out some crab cakes later.
Oh man. That's crazy.
Oh my
Oh
god.
shit. Oh, okay. Wait.
Oh, I swear I just got some abs.
Again? All right, so that short answer also leads into the next topic of colorism back then and like how does it continue to keep us behind even now? Because the main character tries to escape, which is inevitable, and she's captured almost immediately. And she finds out
Yeah.
it's because somebody didn't like her friend, so she rat her out. So that made me think of like, why would you do that? But the reason why didn't like her to begin with is because she was gonna be replaced. And I feel like a lot of slaves who had a better situation than others were always worried about being replaced and being sent back outside. And I was telling you when we were talking during reading the book that this probably gonna make us go down a lot of rabbit holes. But like the idea of slavery, at least in the Americas, was so it was put together in such a way that it played on the humanity of people, where that you would turn on somebody just to stay in your place.
Yeah, to stay in your rank in the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did a lot of research on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was reading like actual research papers on this topic.
Okay.
So I found one from this one actually went into a lot of detail.
Mm-hmm.
It was from the National Center of Biotechnology Information with NIH.
Mm-hmm.
So ncbi.nlm.nih.gov.
Okay.
I could actually send you the link to this if you want to read it too.
Yeah.
But the title of the paper is called "A Comparison of Skin Tone Discrimination Among African American Men, 1995 and 2003."
Okay.
Um, so it was published in The Psychology of Men and Masculinity, volume 15, blah, blah, blah. That's a lot of information.
Yeah.
But in it, they talked about the historical context of skin tone, where it was like basically slavery constituted a strict caste system that distinguished black slaves by their skin tone. Lighter slaves were usually mixed race and
Mm,
favored by their white slave owners. They worked inside, etc.
yeah.
The dark slaves were given more physically strenuous outdoor work and were beaten more often. So, from the paper, in the antebellum period, um, lighter skinned slaves were often freed more often,
Mm,
and they were more likely to become more educated. They were allowed to become educated,
mm.
and they were allowed to own property more often. Not even more often. I think only
I
were allowed. Like the dark skinned slaves weren't allowed to own property, whereas light skinned slaves were.
have a question.
Hmm.
Did they mention if any of those lighter colors actually own slaves themselves?
I've heard that, but I didn't find it in my research. But I did. I
Gotcha.
wasn't looking for it either.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But with that said,
Mm-hmm.
um, a lot of light-skinned slaves used to do things to maintain their elite status and privileges.
Mm-hmm.
So they usually engage in social practices to exclude dark-skinned blacks from entering their social circles. And then they
Mm-hmm.
gave three examples of what they used to do.
Okay.
There's the paper bag test, which is pretty self-explanatory. They would basically take a paper bag, put it next to your skin. If you were darker than the paper bag, you couldn't be in their group.
Man.
There was the comb test, which is if the comb couldn't go through your hair easy,
Jeez.
then you can't be in the group.
Yeah.
And then they had the blue veins test or the blue vein society,
If you can,
which banned blacks whose skin tones were too dark to see blue veins on their arms.
that's wild, dude.
Yeah. So also in that paper, they talked about African American um, they drew a theoretical framework for African American masculinity and desire to belong.
Mm,
And this actually coincided with another paper that I found. This one was found in a Harvard scholar.harvard.edu,
mm-hmm.
um, where basically it was talking about how Black people, because, well, let me actually just read it directly. They basically have this thing called the skin color paradox,
Okay.
which is that Black people as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
we have a commitment to racial identity in the forefront. So we're more interested in trying to help the Black population as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
so much so that we ignore the potential for skin color discrimination to have any significance in the political realm.
Okay.
So basically, what that means is in the political realm, we always talk about Black issues as a monolith, but we
Mm,
don't talk about colorism issues,
gotcha.
and we should
Yeah.
potentially.
Mm-hmm.
I assume it's probably because we want to deal with one thing at a time. Like after we're seen as a people in
Yeah.
general, then we could start working on the colorism thing, but I
Mm,
don't know.
yeah.
Okay, so back to this other paper. Now, this part titled Masculinity and Skin Tone Biases, Complexities with Income and Self-Esteem.
Jeez.
So in the framework that they did, which is called the, what's the second framework called? Masculine Discrepancy Strain. That's the name of the framework.
Mm,
In this framework, they're saying that some research, basically, this framework is that in order to be accepted, normally we base our masculinity relative to other people based on our skin tone.
Mm.
So some research suggests that among African American males, dark-skinned men may be idealized as the alpha males,
Mm.
possessing heightened masculine characteristics such as dominance, strength, virility, confidence in their physical attractiveness, etc.
Mhm.
So we might idealize darker skin as a bigger indicator of being a man. But contrary to that, um, dark skinned men are often stereotyped by both African Americans and whites as being bad boys and very dangerous.
I could see that.
Dark skinned men are self report more frequent occurrences of racial discrimination than medium and light skinned men. Um, there have actually been experimental studies that corroborated this finding. Uh, and dark skinned men are most often the most common targets of racial profiling and police harassment. I mean, it goes on to talk about it affecting the ability to get hired, pay, even talk about President Obama, which
Mhm.
is that during the 2008 election, one study tracked skin tone perception of then Senator Barack Obama and found that conservatives and persons that did not vote for Obama estimated his skin tone to be significantly darker than his true complexion.
Wow.
And in contrast, liberals and persons that voted for Obama estimated that he was significantly more light skinned than his true complexion.
Mm.
So I'll stop there.
How did they like what did they use to test the comparison of his skin tone to his actual skin tone?
I think they probably did a survey. I didn't actually look into that research. They did
Okay.
cite it,
Mhm.
but what I believe they did was a survey, and they probably had a color palette on there and
Uh-uh.
had them choose like what
Mm.
color it for their memory
That
what
would
he
make sense.
was.
That would make sense. Yeah. That's a lot of information, man. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, I went down the rabbit hole. I honestly thought I would not be finished my research in time for the show because I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah. I mean, that's what happens.
and I found a lot more papers that corroborated with this too.
Mhm.
Because I didn't want to do that research where you just read one thing and like, oh, this confirms what I thought. Let me just stick with it. I actually found a lot of stuff. I could actually cite them all if anybody's interested. But we could actually probably put it in the summary
Description.
of the show. Yeah,
Yeah.
the description.
Which is already kind of long, but it's all good. Um, how do you feel that this hierarchical system is like? Is it helping us or it's not? But like, what's its effect on us today besides what you just read? Like
Well,
your.
as you know,
Mhm.
I constantly advocate for like darker skinned people. Like in all my conversations with you and stuff, I always like one thing I always tell people,
Mhm.
or like even my wife, right, is like, would you do or would you react that way if you were white?
Mhm.
Like, for instance, my wife or somebody, I don't want to pick on my wife, but somebody might just be like, I'm not going to do this because blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And I'm like, if you were white, you would have done it though.
Yeah.
So just go do it. Like, on one hand, that's true, but on other hands, you could be potentially putting your life in danger as well. So you have to be careful, pick and choose.
Yeah.
But I think in our society today, definitely colorism still affects. Like even in the Caribbean, you would assume that in the Caribbean, because we're a majority black population,
Mhm.
that we would be more like together. But even in the Caribbean, colorism plays a big role. I remember in undergrad, girls saying that they like only lighter skinned guys, or even girls fawning over like when Americans would come over
Mhm.
and they were white, like fawning over them. And it's like, but you don't act that way towards people that look like you though. But
Yeah.
you like over here, like literally ready to throw your panties on stage for this random person who isn't even that attractive. Although I will say there was one or two guys who I was like,
Yeah.
he,
Yeah. Yeah.
he kind of cute, he kind of cute.
Yeah. Yeah.
But generally it was like just average Joes, and you like dropping your panties for them is kind of weird. So, and then you have these like, and then even too like I've seen girls look at black guys who I would say are like really like chef's kiss. Like this dude is really attractive.
You ain't gotta talk with me.
And
I'm
like
right here. You ain't gotta be so vague about it.
I was trying to keep it in my pants, but come on, like you gotta calm me out.
Oh man.
But um, but then like some random light skinned black dude who look like a Pringle,
Oof.
like
Enoch?
she want him over the black guy simply because he liked her skin and is like, that's so weird.
Yeah. The lighter skinned guys have gotten a bad rep over the past few years, though. They've been seen more as the F boys and things like that,
Yeah, I mean
unfortunately.
it kind of goes both ways. I don't think it's all like pros.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like people assume like, oh, you lighter skin, so you have nothing. Like people don't like
Yeah.
people often think that lighter skinned guys aren't as masculine,
Yeah.
right? They think that they're like as you said, F boys,
Hmm.
or they think that they always emotional.
Yeah.
So
Which that actually leads into what you said about the perception of skin tone and what people think about when they see that skin tone. And it's still like skin tone still affects us to this day, and it's a sad thing. It shouldn't be. It should be what's in here that determines how people treat you rather than what they see. But it's hard
yeah.
to avoid that.
Yeah, like for me, whenever I look at people, I don't really see their skin tone first. I see the person as a person. I
Hmm.
mean, let me be honest. When I interact with white people, I do see their skin first,
Hmm.
only because I worry that they might potentially be racist.
Mm.
And I can't tell that just from looking at them. I can only tell that from interacting with them.
Yeah.
And I would rather assume the worst and hope for the best
Hmm.
than get in the benefit of the doubt and then something happens to me.
Yeah. And that's it's sad. That's the kind of reality that we have to live in. But there's nothing else you can really do about that.
Yeah, and even like small things, like I remember talking to a colleague of mine, and we were talking about a language from another culture
Hmm.
in Hawaii, and he was calling their dialect broken English,
Mm.
and that immediately triggered like that's racist to say
Mm.
because it's not broken English, it's just a different type of English.
Yeah.
And if you really want to think about it, English itself is a quote unquote broken language
It
because it's
is.
actually comprised of a bunch of different languages
Hmm.
put together.
Yeah.
And that language that we were speaking on was a language that was the same. It was a bunch of different languages put together.
We're about to go into the rabbit hole here where we talked about going to another country and then you wanted to speak English there. And when they come here, this one is speaking. Like we just talked about
Uh,
this.
yeah,
Oh
we
man.
just talked about the fact that is racist, or it shows a level of entitlement at least.
No,
It's not racism.
let's start at the beginning. The beginning of this conversation started when the slaves that encountered the main character said that she was talking white. And that's what led us down this path that we were talking about. Because talking properly, and that's even that sounds weird for me to say. So speaking in a way where there's no slang, no dialect, no accent, and using the right words, it seems white, especially in this story. So they called her a white N word, which is like that. Every time they said it, it triggered me because like, oh come on, stop. But she was
Yes.
just speaking the way that she knew how to speak all her life because that's how she grew up. So that made us
Yeah.
think about having to be a black person, let's say from the Caribbean or from a certain place, and you go somewhere else, you get looked down on because you're not speaking properly when this is all you know. When compared to someone who's
Right.
white, who comes from the south, who goes north, they don't have to code switch or they don't have to worry about how they sound because they're gonna be more accepted that way.
Right. Yeah. I don't even know where to start with this one because what exactly is proper? I mean, I guess you kind of outlined it. No accent,
Mm,
using the correct words, using big words, I guess. But it's like people speak how they speak, right? There
mhm.
could be a standard. I guess there could be a standard. But then who is to decide what's the standard? Like
Yeah,
I would assume the standard would be whatever is the local norm.
yeah.
Like in the South, the standard would be to have a Southern drawl.
Hmm.
Does that mean everybody who comes out to now try to mimic a Southern drawl? Probably not.
I don't think so. That's
I mean,
unfair.
in some cases, that could even be seen as disrespectful because you like making fun of me
Hmm.
in a way. So, but back to what we're saying, the conversation was, why is it that when they go someplace, they don't have to code switch, but when people are around them, they're expected to code switch?
Yeah. I don't feel like there should be any discrimination based on your accent or on how you speak, unless you're speaking like extremely broken, extremely like hood. Like I don't want to give titles to these things, but like
Yeah.
cursing all the time and just using a heap of slang that no one understands. Like only you and
Well,
your core group understands. Things like that.
wouldn't that just be us gatekeeping what should be okay and what's not okay?
Hmm. I don't
Or is there like
know.
an actual objective way to say like this is not okay and this is okay,
I don't feel like anybody should be discriminated for based on how they talk, unless it's negative, unless it's taken away from what you're trying to
disrespectful?
do.
Mm.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think like being disrespectful, being impolite, or whatever, no matter how you speak,
Mm-hmm.
whether you speaking properly, quote unquote, or you're speaking like a hood N word,
Mm-hmm.
as people obviously attribute, if you're speaking like a hood person, you try and be like an N word,
Yeah.
which is wrong as well. Um, But no matter how you speak, if you speak in that way, but you're speaking positive,
Yeah.
you should be looked at positively. But if you speak in negatively, even
Mm-hmm.
if you say it in a nice way, that should be looked at negatively. That like I think it more matters the context of what you're saying
Mm-hmm.
rather than how you're saying it.
Yeah. So
That's a that's the objective.
actually, we've reached the 1 hour mark, so we're halfway in the show right now. Um, Again, I'd like to plug our audio podcast, plug that we're here every 2 weeks. Shout out to our previous guests, which we realize that we haven't been doing much, and we would like to do that. So we have Kamal, we have Afia, we have Nick, we have Show Ronin, and we have Kieran. So we've had a good bit of people here. Yeah,
Yeah. And recently Kamal actually shouted us out on his platform as well. So,
yeah,
big ups to Kamal for that. Really appreciated it.
yeah. Let people know that we are reading the comments when you drop them live during the podcast, and we do go back to read the comments after the podcast is over. We're always trying to engage with our guests and our audience as well. So if you do have any questions or anything you want to say, you can drop it here now, and then we'll come back to it in probably like 30 minutes or so when we're looking at them again. Henry, I see you. I see you, man.
So one thing that always bothered me is when Americans would come to the islands,
Uh-huh.
and even bothers me about myself. Like when I'm around Americans,
Uh-huh.
I feel a need to like
Cool.
talk more
Mm,
like them so
yeah.
they can understand me.
Uh-huh.
But I feel like that's not right for some. Like I feel like in a way, like something about that is wrong. Like I should just use my own accent and they could understand me if they listen. Like I've never heard an accent,
Uh-huh.
even like Asian people who don't speak English very well,
Yeah.
and they speak in an accent that's hard to quote unquote hard to understand. I've never found any accent where I couldn't understand what they were trying to say.
I feel like you may be not, I won't say biased as in you being biased, but I think your ears are being biased. Because in the Caribbean, we're exposed to everything all the time. So it's easy for us to pick up on things, and we kind of have to. Because even going to school in St. Croix, our teachers will be from St. Kitts or Dominica or St. So like, it's not just the same people that we interact with all the time. And we do speak faster on a whole for the most part. Because sometimes I hear myself talk and I'm like, there's no way this person understood what I said just now. Let me slow it down for them.
Yeah, we do speak a lot faster.
Yeah.
I think because a lot of our dialect is conjugated words.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like blah, 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 blah. But also, I think you're right because I did grow up. My uncle is from St. Kitts, but
Mm-hmm.
my family is from St. Kitts,
Yeah.
and my uncle had a strong Kittitian accent, and he would speak every word.
Yo,
A sentence would just come out as one word.
that's how I feel when I
That's
talk
how fast he would
sometimes.
speak. Like, "But we don't watch this." I'm like, what? Wait, what should this? I like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, wash the dishes. Okay, I go in to do that now. Like,
Yeah, so that's why you could probably understand more than somebody else probably could.
but I still think it's not right because even when they go to like a different country
Yeah, I
where
know.
it's a whole completely different language, they're like,
Hmm.
y'all need to learn to speak English here because I come in as a visitor to your place and I need
Yeah,
to get around and get food and it's like, how about you learn how to speak
yeah.
Mandarin? How about you learn to speak Japanese or German or whatever?
This actually, I just thought about this. This actually opens an avenue for a business idea to have people be tour guide, like translators as tour guides for people that coming in. So if you go into somewhere like, let's say we go into the Netherlands, in our package for our vacation, we could actually add on a translator to come with us everywhere we go. And he did they get paid a certain rate. I mean, it's probably gonna be expensive, but it'll work.
I feel like that does exist.
Oh, never mind then.
I don't know if it does. I just
Hmm.
think it does.
It's such a good idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you think we should hop to now? Because I don't know where the flow would be.
I want to get to one of my questions, okay?
Yeah, we have been in my realm.
Yeah, yeah. We've
All
been in
right.
your realm long enough, okay?
Okay, okay.
Time for the light skins to rise at this point.
Okay. Oh man.
Okay, if
Mm,
you was the main character in this book, a
mm-hmm.
black woman, would you have done anything differently from her?
Mm.
And that's the end of this. And I don't know why I made it sound like it was open-ended.
Um, as me?
No, you're her. Like, okay,
Okay.
you're you, but in her body.
Okay, so I'm a black woman. I feel like so from her point of view, it's all about survival, and she has to save this young man to live. But I feel like I I'm a person that can't be bribed. And I feel like that's like a universal bribe right there. Like save him or you die. I'll be like, okay then. The first time he look at me wrong, talk to me wrong, do anything wrong, I'm willing to go and just let him drown or whatever. Like it's fine. That's the
I'm not gonna lie. Same. I'd have been like, boy, I'd have been hitting him so much times. I'd have slapped him up so much times. Like, boy, who you think you talking to?
man, that's
He'd have think I'm his
crazy.
next mother. He'd have been calling me mommy.
Oh my goodness. And especially the part you see, the part that triggered you is the part where I'd also probably draw the line. Because when I heard that listening to the book, I was like, there's no way this happening right now.
Yeah. I think something that I would do differently from her would be trying to teach people to read sooner
Yeah, true that.
and trying to get people to be free sooner. Because
Hmm.
she like trying to talk him into freeing people, but I
Yeah,
think she did it too late in his life.
yeah. But I feel like she wasn't around the way. So, not a spoiler. She doesn't spend as much time as she does there that she does here. So a minute in our time is like months for them. So
Mhm.
I felt like if she could have probably, and then it's hard because she's a black woman, so she can't actually nurture him to become a better person the way that I feel like she should have. Well, not should have, like I would have liked it to be. Because then that way she could probably change his entire mindset around slavery and around black people. Because even as a kid, he was already ingrained in the things that should happen in respects to the relationship between somebody that's white and somebody that's black. He assumed at like 12 that her being 26 still was subservient to him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if she could change him complete at all, to be honest, because every time she come back to our time, to present time,
Hmm.
years would pass before she come back. So like
Hmm.
she would literally have to stay in the past in order to change him. And I don't think she could have done that.
Even when she'd stayed for a long time, it wasn't enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think she could have done much different, to be honest.
Yeah,
But the little things that she could have done, she should have done more of. But she did it more like to the end of his life, like more to the middle of his life, I guess.
yeah.
And by then he was already an adult.
Hmm.
So it's hard to change an adult's like views on stuff.
And this is actually from us having hindsight because I feel like her going back. it's just such a shock. There's no time to think of, let me try and change him to become a better person.
True.
It's like, let me survive this instance, or let me figure out how to get back home. So I think that
True.
her priorities were more survival,
True. Yeah. I think you're right.
which
All right.
leads to more of your questions.
Next question then. Uh, so if what's your thoughts on consent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like in the book, a lot of stuff was happening where people didn't really have a choice,
Mm-hmm.
but then they were like said like, okay, you choose what you want to do.
Yeah.
But like really and truly, there was only one real choice, like only one real answer they could give.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that someone can give consent when they don't really have any other choice?
I think that would depend on what consent is. It would depend on consent.
Oh, I did research on this. I ready for this one.
I didn't do much research. I just thought about it for a while. So I feel like, well, this is just me thinking. Consent is just going along with it, but not necessarily agreeing with it. Or does it have to be both?
I think it has to be both.
It has to be. Then
Yeah,
I don't feel like it's consent then if you don't want to do it. I
right.
feel like you just stop fighting, stop arguing, and you just let it happen and move on, which is
Yeah, exactly.
sad.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, it's not consensual.
Hmm.
Everything that happened, like even when the one he was jonesing for
Yeah.
came to his room, for
Hmm.
example,
Yeah.
non-consensual, even though she came on her own, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't want to be there. And even like afterwards, the way how she was talking about him and
Hmm.
being angry at the main character and stuff for what's going on, you could
Yeah.
tell that she didn't want to
Hmm.
do anything with him, but she didn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
And then you had the slaves who did stuff with their master just because they didn't want to, they wanted their protection.
Hmm.
Like, remember that slave that she was in the room and then like nobody was messing with her,
Hmm.
but then he got bored of her, so he like kick her back out into the fields and pick a different one.
Yep.
I was like, wow.
And,
Like,
and then
even if you
she was
don't,
free game after that.
yeah, even if you don't want to do anything, you just do it, especially as a woman,
Hmm.
because women are often like we've been objectified since slavery times.
Hmm.
Well, women,
Yeah.
men too, in a way. Not even in a way, men too, but just not for sex.
Hmm.
Um, can I say sex on this platform?
We said it a lot.
I mean, I said intercourse previously, and now I just outright just like sex.
It should be fine.
All right. But yeah, if you, as a woman, you know that you're gonna be objectified, you know that they want you sexually, you're
Hmm.
gonna put yourself in a position to better your life by using your body. And I think women still do that nowadays.
Yeah, I feel like back then it was compounded because most times it was for their own protection, but then in the extreme cases, you gotta protect your husband, you gotta protect your kids. You're doing it for them, basically. But but it's not a choice, really.
Oh,
You know what
imagine
I'm talking
your
about?
wife
But it's
have to,
happened. It's happened.
damn, I don't know if I could survive that.
Yeah.
Like, I would definitely want to kill him,
They,
even if my wife is like doing it for the family.
hmm.
Knowing that is gonna mess with my head. Like,
Yeah. But then
yeah, I
if you
can't.
don't do it, then your husband gets sold, then you don't see him again. Your children get sold, you don't see them again. So it's like it's always been hard for women, it's black women.
Yeah, yeah. Man, let's move on from this because it's making me kind of sad. Like, I just imagining
Hmm.
like me as a slave, as a dark-skinned slave, because if I were a light-skinned slave, I guess it wouldn't make a
Yeah.
big difference. But my wife having to sleep with him so that I don't get sold
Hmm.
and so that our kids don't get sold.
Yeah.
And then if she do any little thing to make him angry, he gonna sell me
Yeah.
or sell our kids.
We're talking
That's
about
crazy.
a novel called Kindred. It's right there behind Mino's face. Kindred. It's a book written by Octavia E. Butler. We're just using it as our springboard to bounce topics off of each other.
Yeah. It's a really good book. If
Hmm.
you didn't see the beginning of the podcast, we kind of gave a synopsis of what the book is about.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, yeah. And by the way, Octavia E. Butler is the best author, like the best author you would ever read. Read all her stuff. Trust me, you will not regret it. All right.
Speaking of authors, do you think that they use their work to think out loud, or is there some kind of hidden social commentary?
Definitely. Like when I read Aragon, for
Wait,
example.
wait, wait. I asked you a question, one or two, and you said definitely.
Wait, what?
Do you think authors use their work to think out loud in a way, or do you some hidden commentary?
Both.
we said, we said definitely, which is like yes.
Definitely, because it's both.
Do you want to go in the red car or the blue car? Yep, indubitably.
No, 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 no. That's like asking me, do you like red or blue? And I said, both.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you like red or blue? Definitely. I like both.
Okay, proceed.
Listen, don't listen. English is my second language, okay?
From what?
From Perusian.
Oh
So
my
please.
god. Oh man, go ahead.
um, Shoot, now you made me lose my train of thought. I think both are true. I think
Okay.
that they think out loud and they use it for social commentary,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think Octavia. Oh, who's Suzanko? I think I've seen her name before.
That's from Twitch.
Yeah, that's the correct answer. Anyway, um, shit. Now you're losing my train of thought. I
They do
think
it.
that
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that Octavia definitely does that often. Like she
Mm-hmm.
uses it as a way to self-reflect, and I think she even mentions that she does it in one of her things that I read, one of her essays.
Mm-hmm.
Like she often used her writing to kind of like vent in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like something is bothering her, or if she was scared by a situation, she would turn it into a story. So, but I was gonna say in Aragon, I think that the author for that book did it too when he was exploring the idea of like whether gods are real.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't really say, the author doesn't necessarily say whether they themselves believe in it or not, but they kind of explore the idea of, well, what if?
Mm-hmm. Gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah. What
I've
about you?
I had the same idea. I think maybe initially they're like, let me write something and see where it goes. And then they look at it and they say, this links with this that's happening or this idea that's been around and let me expound on that. And then as they write, they find more facts to put together to build their, I guess, their soapbox. But not really, yes. Because this didn't feel like a soapbox. It just felt like a good story.
Yeah. And I think that's the good thing about it. So I actually looked at what social commentary was
Mm-hmm.
from Wikipedia. It's the act of using rhetorical means to provide commentary on issues in a society.
Yeah.
It's often done with the idea of implementing or promoting change by informing the general populace about a given problem and appealing to people's sense of justice.
Mm.
So I
Okay.
don't think necessarily that she's trying to affect change or anything per
Mm-hmm.
se, but I think she's pointing it out to make people think about it. Not, I don't even know if she's doing it on purpose though.
Yeah.
But I think like it being pointed out makes people think and be like, this needs to change,
Like what
you
we
know?
talked about in the workforce, working too hard to get more work, colorism. These are happening. These are things that need to be talked about, and this is a way to talk about them, but still give like a story feel to it.
Yeah. So we, in a way, we're ourselves doing social commentary.
Yep. Right now.
Yeah. But yeah, I think, especially since a lot of her stuff is based on her fears, and as a black woman
Mm-hmm.
in America, like you could see it in her writing,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. So let's go back in time again. So, well, no, let's go to one of your questions and come back to this question.
All right.
So, knowing everything we know about slaves and what they did to survive, what are your thoughts on Uncle Tom's slaves? Do you want me to go first, or you want to go first?
You go first.
Okay. So I just Googled Uncle Tom and then I went to I went three or four down. So the Uncle Tom that we speak about now is not the Uncle Tom that was first written about, which made me upset because as we always talk about in our private conversations, words change so much to the point where you don't even know what it was meant to be. Especially like slang words and words that we use in our culture. So, Uncle Tom was not like the feeble old man that he's portrayed to be in movies and on TV, and he wasn't just subservient all the time just because that's what he wanted to do. He was actually a strong, able-bodied black person who just had a strong Christian faith. And this Christian faith produced itself more than being a slave would be. So it depended on where he
Mm.
was, allowed him to be that person. So his first and second masters allowed him to portray that Christian faith where he was just a nice person. And his last master was more evil and more vindictive. And that contrast there is where the story really builds. Because he actually had a chance to beat a woman because he was being trained to be an overseer, and he didn't want to do it because she was weak and feeble, and he wouldn't do it. He refused. So he was beaten. And then in the end of his life, where he died, he had the opportunity to rat out two women who ran away, and he knew where they were, but he just wouldn't say where they were. So his master beat him to death, and he said he'd rather die than to do it. So like that's a stark
It's
contrast
completely opposite.
from the Uncle Tom that we talk about today, and it's because the media back then. So this book, when it was first written, Uncle Tom's Cabin, it outsold the Bible. That's how strongly it impacted the times back then. But in the first 3 years after it was published, 14 pro-slavery novels came in to debunk it. If that don't tell you the mindset and the strength of ideas and the strength of wanting to have an echo chamber.
Yeah, out just because I spend a lot of time with the master. I don't have a choice. I'm not backstabbing my own people. Just because you see me over there doing something that I don't even want to do
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that I'm a traitor to my race.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes the perception of things make people think something. I mean, and this happens to other things as well. Like people see you, you come outside with some nice shoes on. They're like, "Oh, look, Kurt, he must have a lot of money."
Mm-hmm.
Or like there's anything you could think of. People are gonna perceive instead of like just assume instead of like confirming with you. Like if that makes sense. So
Yeah, it does.
so I don't know if you were done, so I'll let you finish and then I'm gonna give mine.
Um, the only thing I could do is just describe like the Toms, but I don't knowing what I know now is like I don't even care about the term anymore because it doesn't make sense because it is not accurate.
You know what that remind me of though?
Mm,
Like people using words in a derogatory way, such as like Indian giving, or not even just words, like whole phrases,
mm-hmm.
like Indian giving, or you gypped me and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. Like these things that have racist history
Yeah.
for how they even came to be. And I feel like Uncle Tom is part of that too.
Yeah.
It's like we using this thing that has a racist history. It's basically a word that meant something positive, but through racist influence turned into something negative. And then because people don't really know why the how the thing came to be, they just go along with it and continue using it in the wrong way until it actually becomes that negative thing.
Yep.
Even how like the swastika has become a negative thing now
Mm-hmm.
because it was associated with this one racist group. Like racism ruins everything basically.
Yeah.
My thoughts on it is that I kind of feel empathy
Mm.
for people who are labeled as Uncle Toms, and I don't even know what word to use in place of it. Know that I know that it's
Yeah.
not the correct word, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna just keep using it for the rest of the podcast. Is that sometimes people were betraying people, like when the girl
Definitely.
rat her out for running away.
Mm-hmm.
But then other times, people just perceiving you as doing something. And to me, like in both cases, I feel empathy though. Like even the girl ratting her out,
Yeah.
like I kind of feel sorry for her really because she only ratting her out because she was worried about her own survival.
Yep.
And sometimes people like to play it like, oh well, you should do better. Like instead of like putting yourself first, you should always worry about everybody else. And sometimes I think generally, yes, that's true. Like you should think of the greater good,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes your survival overrides your sense of morality. Like there's people who literally plead guilty to crimes because they were tortured, and
Yeah.
sometimes you want the pain to stop. You
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily, you're not thinking about, I'm not going to plead guilty because I know I was right. You're gonna be like, I just want this pain to stop. I just want to stop. I'd rather be either dead or
Mm-hmm.
I'll just admit anything so this could stop.
Yeah.
So I just feel empathy. I don't
Well,
think it's okay, but I also have a hard time being angry at them
yeah.
at the same time.
So I guess I didn't really answer the question. I just gave history. So when it comes to like slaves who actually enjoy doing this to be, I feel like they try to become like the masters. They want to be on that level of power to have that trip as well. So they would actually rat people out just for the sake of it, to try and maintain their status. And this makes me think about the conversation we had about going back in time, which I guess we're all going to talk about later, and thinking about having a different type of hierarchy and trying to survive slavery in itself. So when I heard Uncle Tom's, before it was like I got the reaction that people wanted me to give, which is like, yeah, you're a sellout. You're doing this thing just to appear pleasing to the opposition. Well, not really opposition, but like, you know what I mean? Like, you're trying to please someone else to try to fit in with them. So now you're looking down on your own people, which I don't really like. But everybody does what they have to do what they think they need to do to survive.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I could even give a modern day example of that.
Hmm.
So on Facebook, I once had a person on my friend list.
Hmm.
Notice I said on my friend list rather than a friend because
Yeah.
they weren't my friend. But there was on my friend list a black guy, dark skin,
Hmm.
who believed racism isn't real. And I had many discussions with him about it. And I soon came to realize that he was just trying to fit in
Mm.
with his white friends. Like
Uh,
everybody that he was friends with was white or Asian. They weren't black. And he gave me an example. One time I was like, dude, racism against it. And he gave me an example of it happening to him through colorism.
mm.
And in my head, I was like, if you could recognize it from your own people,
Yeah.
why you can't recognize it from white people?
Hmm.
Like just because in your crowd you're treated well as the exception or whatever,
Hmm.
doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But at the time, I couldn't communicate that to him. I mean, and to be fair, I didn't really care to because I was like, this is just ridiculous that you even saying it don't exist.
Yeah.
Like, it's like my mind is blown right now.
Hmm.
But I guess he's the kind of person I could see back in the times if he was a slave, being the one who like always brown nosing, kissing the master's ass or ratting
Hmm.
his own people out because he don't see anything wrong with it. Like he just want to fit in. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I don't necessarily think that they're trying to survive. I think they also just want to fit in.
Mm. That's crazy. So let's jump back in time then. So we have three different periods we're gonna go back to as ourselves. So early slavery, which is like back in Africa, middle slavery, so like in the book, and then right when everything was getting quote unquote better, so like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King times. If you went back to each of these times, what would you try to do, and what would your feelings be?
If I was in Africa, oh man, and that's another rabbit hole I went down,
Mm,
which was Africa's involvement in the slave trade.
I remember.
Dude, reading.
That's a different podcast altogether, by the
Okay, okay, I won't speak on it too much then. But
yeah.
that was making me sad as well. Because on one hand, I felt like they were kind of coerced
Mm,
into doing it. So then they kind of lose some of the blame. But then on the other hand, how dumb are you? Like, that's how I feel generally about humans in general. But anyway,
mm,
because there's always greed. Like, greed always plays a role into stuff.
yeah.
Greed and perceived differences.
Mm-hmm.
always plays a role in human society and hierarchy, I guess. Plays a role in like negative stuff happening. What was the question though? I forgot.
If you go back, if you were to go back in this period, what would your thoughts be? What would you try to change?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So if I went to Africa, if I was in Africa, I don't know what I could change there. I would try and prevent the slave trade to begin with,
Uh-huh.
maybe by pointing out that cultural differences is not enough of a reason to say that you're different people.
Uh-huh.
Um, I would also probably try and show like these guys are manipulating you. But I don't. The problem is I don't know how my words would affect people because of greed. Like they're gonna be
Uh-huh.
like, I don't care if they're manipulating me. I need these guns so I could defeat these other people.
Yeah.
Or and as I have to go into some detail.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Basically, what the white people did, right? They would follow the wars in Africa, and they would basically set up their slave camps near these wars. So basically, they didn't even have to be coerced. Like, I mean, not that they didn't have to be coerced, but they didn't even have to do much besides just keep poking the bear, like instigating these fights and stuff, and then just follow wherever the fight goes, and
Uh-huh.
then get slaves that way.
Yeah.
And I feel like countries still do that. They instigate wars with each other and then swoop in and steal resources or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And it's the same thing. And this happens to Africa a lot because Africa is a big continent and it has a lot of different countries in that one continent. Whereas most other continents, if you really look at it, an entire country would take up a majority of the continent.
Yeah.
So Africa is very divided. And as you know, divided you fall.
Uh-huh.
I think that's a next issue is that I would try to unite Africa in some way. Try to
Uh-huh.
like make one like I would probably be like the who was that king who like conquered a lot of was it Julius Caesar who
Probably.
created the Roman Empire?
Probably.
I would try and do that. I would basically try and conquer all the lands
Uh-huh.
to unite everybody, which kind of sucks because I have to do something evil
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
to do something good.
Well, that's usually what you have to do, because as another reference to Jurassic Park, most bad things came from good intentions. So sometimes you have to do something bad to let the good come forth from it. But then, as you said, it'll be more like a conquering. So would it really be giving you their consent to join you, or they just be joining you just to survive?
I mean, they're going. I think that first generation they would just be doing to survive. But just like with anything else, as generations go on, they
Yeah.
can just assimilate.
Hmm. I feel like
That
if I went back, I would try to come back in a way that would make me seem like a deity. So then they have no choice but to listen to me. And then
you
that's
saw
just,
what happened to Jesus, right?
well, I'm just saying, like, if I had to nitpick my scenario and my best case scenario, it would be like that. Because then if I just go back as a regular black person, who gonna listen to me anyways? The only thing I could do then is to actually tell the people around me, it's only one of them, and it's like 15 of us. So why are we letting him do this to us? Overpower him, go to the next people, free them, and just go around Africa freeing people and creating this tribe of freemen. Because even within one ship coming to America, there was multiples of different peoples and nations on that ship for the reason so that they couldn't talk to each other, and just because they wanted to fit as much as possible on that ship as well. But like
Yeah,
that would be one step in getting to where you can see that you're from this tribe, I'm from this tribe, we both have chains on. There's nothing different about us. And that would be
right.
step one to get into where you want to be, where we're all united in one way.
Okay, so to expound on your idea, so Amistad, which is just one of many ships that the slaves killed, and go ahead.
I watched that movie in fourth grade. What were they thinking?
I think that's a good thing.
Oh my god, I was so traumatized. Anyways, go ahead.
I mean, not as a good thing to show kids that, but I think it's a good thing to show like real history.
Hmm.
Maybe not visually. Maybe they should do it in a book form.
Man.
Like that's like showing Passion of the Christ, like kindergarten. Like, okay, guys, come watch this guy get beat. Like
Yeah.
anyway, that's not that funny. But although Passion of Christ is hilarious.
Oh my goodness.
Um, I just kidding. I didn't laugh. I didn't even like question it. Um, I think what I would do is if I was on one, I would try and get on top of one of those ships
Mm-hmm.
with my future weaponry,
Mm,
help them escape. Hopefully, I learn multiple languages, talk to the people. They're gonna
mm-hmm.
be like, "How this dude know all our languages?" They
Yeah.
might treat me like a deity because I did all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we go back to Africa, then I would try to work my liberation movement that way, kind of like what you said. And
Mm-hmm.
then I would go conquer all the lands that way. Kind of
Yeah.
like
Well, maybe you
remember
would
that
need to
movie?
conquer it at that point.
Hmm?
Maybe you would need to conquer at that point because you'd probably be saving princes and people of status that could talk to their people, and then they would just join you like that. Maybe.
But the problem is, I want to create one country.
No, I mean you wouldn't have to conquer. You could have the make like a treaty where everybody comes together, where they still have their, their individuality, but they're working with you,
Or make it kind of like USA, whereas like instead of being different countries, you're just different states
basically.
in one country.
Yeah, something like that.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good idea. That
Yeah.
will avoid war.
Mm-hmm.
The problem though is that sometimes peace like that is fleeting because of back in them times resources.
Mm-hmm.
So it was oftentimes easier to just take resources from somebody instead of like trying to do it diplomatically.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. I would, if I could, I would stay back and keep at it until I die instead of like coming back to the present.
Mm-hmm. So, what about like mid-slavery, like in the book?
One thing I could do is try and help people escape or try and teach people how to read and write.
Yeah,
That's the only two things I could think of.
I agree. I had the same things here. But then, let's say you're trying to teach people how to read, but then you have your Uncle Toms, and they're like, they rat you out. So it's like you have to vet people and learn who to trust, and even interest in them, they could still be coerced to rat you out. So it's like it's extremely hard in that scenario to do something good as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, in trying to do something for the betterment of people, there's always risk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, the book I'm working on, right? Initially, I was going to try and start an activism group.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, well, if I look through history, every group that tries to better Black people, there's always their leadership getting assassinated or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get assassinated. So therefore, I am not going to farm this group. Like, I'm going to just write a book. So
Oh
that's why
man.
I came to the idea of just writing the book.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody else, if they take my ideas and they start an activism group, then they could be the poster child for it instead of me. And I'm not saying I want to put somebody else's life in danger,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying that I think there are braver people out there, and I'm not brave enough.
Mm. I think taking the step to write the book is actually brave in itself because you're gonna be talking about things that may be polarizing and may affect you in the long run.
That's true.
So there's different
But
levels to
I
bravery.
could deal with that. I could
Yeah.
deal with like being a pariah of society,
Mhm.
but I can't deal with trying to survive an assassination.
Too much work. Speaking
Yeah,
of,
I
speaking,
already paranoid. If you just
yeah,
make
yeah,
it like I don't have a what do you call them, like rooms that you build.
a bunker?
No, a panic room.
Oh, a panic
I
room.
don't have the resources to build a panic room or none of that. So,
Oh man. Okay, speaking of that, then what would you do if you were around Malcolm X and Martin Luther King? Like you could stand
oh, I would have
shoulder to
joined
shoulder
Malcolm
with
X
them.
for sure.
Yeah.
I would have joined Malcolm X. Martin Luther King, you did your thing, bro. But I don't want to downgrade what they was doing,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't believe in a nonviolence approach 100%. Like I believe you should try your best to be nonviolent,
Mm-hmm.
but I also believe that you should probably give people back the same energy as well.
Mm.
Like if I being nonviolent and you beating me to death,
Yeah.
Come on, no, that's not right.
Yeah, that's true. I felt the same way. I would actually try and I don't know. I might become a Black Panther myself. I would try to instill something where we would have leaders like them progress through time and have people step up over and over and over again. Because I feel like after they quote unquote step down, we haven't had anybody like that to actually make an impact in like the day to day of the Black society, if that makes sense.
Hmm. I feel like that's what we miss in modern times. Well, maybe we're not missing it. Maybe it's just not as publicized.
Mm,
I was gonna say, I think we're missing a lot of Black leadership in modern times. Like, I feel like we still divided.
mm-hmm.
We don't have like groups collaborating. Or maybe we do, but I just don't know. Maybe I'm just ignorant.
That's fine. But I don't hear of anything, so I can agree with you. And that's why I
Yeah.
felt that way.
Like BLM came out
Mm-hmm.
and then it was basically demonized, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
People mischaracterized what they were about. People found the worst case scenarios and used that to say that's what the group was completely about, like the whole group.
Yeah.
And it's like, bruh, that's like looking at the KKK and being like, oh, the KKK had a few chapters that were nonviolent, so that's a nonviolent group.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's not, you don't characterize whole groups
Mm-hmm.
based on a small subset of people doing something. That's not how that works. But
Yeah.
anyway, BLM got bastardized and demonized to the ground. So
Yeah.
now it's like a group where people are polarized even about their views on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, regardless of whatever the group is doing or has done or has not done,
Yeah.
what is the key thing that they're trying to do? Can
Yeah.
we focus on that? Like, let's just ignore all this peripheral BS
Mm-hmm.
and all this political BS and think about what they're trying to accomplish. Are we on board with that or not?
Mm-hmm.
That's what the conversation should be about, not about all these other peripheral things that people keep trying to bring up. Like, it's just dumb.
Yeah. Um. Okay. So we're almost at closing, which is good. We have one more topic to talk about, and that's how environments shape us. I guess it's shaping personality. That's what I found when I was trying to search. Actually, when I was trying to look up for programming and environment, it brought me into like coding. I'm like, no, I want to talk about personalities, programming, environment, and it brought up like coding personality. I'm like, what are you doing? It's so hard to. And this touched on the last podcast we
I could
had.
tell you what I looked up to find it.
No, I'm just telling you like the process when I tell you the algorithm hinders like actual research. This is what I mean. Like you have to
Oh, I
be
searched it incognito.
not it's not even that because even that doesn't help. It'll still bring
Oh,
you
I
things
see.
that it thinks that you want to look at, and you have to be
Oh,
extremely
I see.
specific in what you're looking for. And even then, it doesn't really work.
Well, what I typed in was, is it possible to resist social programming?
Mm-hmm.
Because before I did type in programming, I typed in, is it possible to resist programming? And
Mm-hmm.
then it just gave me a heap of stuff about SAS. And I was like, this would have been good if I was at work. But this is not what I need.
Oh man.
It was like how to code for yeah, like logistical stuff. I'm like, I guess I see it, how to resist, but no.
What do you find on that?
Man, I found a bunch of stuff, dude. So one thing I found, I'll quote this one.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying, I actually wanted to talk more about the consent thing, by the way, but we already moved on, so it's okay. But they're saying that research shows that a series of experiments concluded that when people didn't have a strong opinion about a choice presented to them, they simply mimicked the people around them. Rather than asking questions or spending time learning about something,
Mm-hmm.
people just defer to the social default.
Gotcha.
So, what that, to me, how I interpreted that is like when I grew up, the social default is you're a Christian, you go to church, and you believe in what people believe in.
Yeah.
And you grow up and you keep that and you just go with that for the rest of your life. That's the social default.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have people who question that and may or may not change their opinion. And so that's them resisting the programming. And that's how kind of like I viewed it. Like the resisting programming is basically, regardless of if you still conclude the same thing or not,
Yeah.
is you actually digging in and trying to make sure that what you believe or agree with makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, but then that brings up other issues such as biases and logical fallacies and all these other things that still play into it. Because oftentimes I feel like people still conclude things incorrectly, and that might just be my opinion,
Mhm.
but conclude things incorrectly because they didn't account for a bias or didn't account for a logical fallacy,
I could see
and then
that.
they still make the same conclusion.
Yeah. So the thing that stood out to me was that studies found that environment accounts for 50 to 70% of your personality. And that's a lot.
That's a
But
lot.
but even in that, people in the same environments could have different outcomes. So that's positive. Like people grow up in the same house, but within that one environment, you have different interactions with the world that can change you, like different teachers, different friends, and this all
Yeah.
can affect you as well. So even though it's like almost most of it, there are other small parts that can play a big role as well. So I feel like the number is decent, but it's almost arbitrary because other things can have a bigger impact than your environment. Because there's also the genetic and biological aspect of programming as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that that kind of confirms what I thought, which is that social programming has a big effect. Because when I was thinking of this question,
Mm-hmm.
what I was thinking about was, colorism and all these other things that we still do today that started since back then,
Mm-hmm.
and why. Like we know it's an issue. It's not like, I mean, most of us know it's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we don't know, but yet we still play into it.
Yeah.
And why? Like, is it really that hard to resist?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it is.
Yeah. So they point out three different scenarios that would affect your programming. So your work is too far away from your desk, causing you to procrastinate on getting started. The plates you use at dinner have a wider area, so you tend to fill them with more food than you need. You browse a
Mm,
website and see a suggested article or video, which you become curious about and then click on. And these are all things that kind of program us to do certain things. So it's
yeah.
in our best interest to put forth things in place that would go against these programming. So, like for the first one, have your work and yourself close together so you don't have a chance to say, I'll get to it. Use smaller plates when you eat, and then I guess not click on articles that interest you.
That reminds me of remember we had the conversation about social media and how it, like the algorithm makes
Mm-hmm.
you get addicted and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy who basically created a program so that he would stop using Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that reminded me of.
Yeah. Actively fighting programming.
Yeah, but how do you actively fight programming when it's like racism and colorism?
I feel like the question is, how do you fight it when you don't know what you're fighting? I think that's the bigger problem there. Because
Mm.
growing up, you don't necessarily know what is happening is racist until you're too old to actually say like you know what's going on.
I think I actually have a solution.
Okay, go ahead.
So I work in public health,
Mm-hmm.
and oftentimes I think of solutions based on what I know in public health. So in public health, we have these things called community-based interventions. Oh, sorry, that's not where I want to go. That is the solution, but where I want to go with this was I think a lot of things in America can be handled with a public health approach,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically you identify a problem that you could fix. You take a bigger problem, you break it down to smaller things that you could fix, right? You find a solution for that smaller thing, you
Mm-hmm.
implement it, you track it so you could keep tabs on like, is it working or not? That's where all your research can come from and your published papers and stuff can come from. If it's not working, you try the next thing. If it is working, you tweak it or you keep it, like you do things to improve it if it is working.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but basically, what I would propose is a community-based intervention thing, but for the whole country,
Mm,
where you basically implement some kind of education or some kind of maybe even advertising, because
mhm.
advertising is a big way to manipulate people.
Yeah.
Um, Even our media, movies, instead of always showing the lighter skinned person as a savior, show some dark skinned people, stuff like that. Just basically implement these things, track how it's if it's having any effect on society, and then adjust as we go and just keep doing that incrementally over time.
Mm,
Like I don't think there's currently a framework that's like actively doing this. I think like it's kind of more like a helter skelter of things happening all at once.
yeah.
And it just happens to be trending in that direction. But
Mm.
if we actually did it like as a scientific way, step by step, instead of like just random, I think it'll probably have faster results.
I can agree with that. I feel like there's enough people who have the knowledge to do this to make it work. And it's just getting the public to actually accept it. Because if you're not reaching the people that you need to reach, then I wouldn't say that it's a waste of time, but it's like if everybody that's for it is doing it, then it's nothing's really changing from what we have now. You need to get the people
Yeah,
who are on the other end of the spectrum from you to actually see what you're talking about and actually not understand, but like respect where you're coming from enough to actually listen to you. And I feel like that's gonna be always the main roadblock to change. Is like some people are so stuck in their ways and in their thoughts that they don't even want to think about the other side or the other viewpoint of views.
yeah. And that's like shit, I had something I wanted to say, but I lost my train of thought. But in terms of people being on the other side, I think that that's what I'm gonna say. We actually need to start with the politics, the politicians, or our system that we have in place. We need better leadership in America, period. Like after Obama, I ain't gonna lie. I mean, even before Obama, we kind of been like up and down, up and down. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like now we just like trending down in leadership. Like
Mm-hmm.
the leadership that we don't hold our leaders accountable as much as we used to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the qualifications aren't as good as they used to be. Um, just it seems like for a long time in America, even before now,
Mm-hmm.
only the rich have been in charge, which is a problem. How are
Yeah.
you going to speak for people when you don't have the same experiences as them? You
Yeah.
you can't. The majority of Americans aren't rich.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, the divide between rich and poor, rich and middle class, and all of that is getting wider and wider. There's no way these rich people understand how people who are middle class, poor, etc. feel or
Yeah.
what they need. And then on top of that, they refuse to listen to experts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the big problem there. I wouldn't have a problem with the rich continuing to rule
Mm-hmm.
if they would at least listen to experts in the fields, telling
Yeah.
them like, hey, this is what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you listen to like a body of experts, because you might not want to listen to just one expert or two
Yeah.
because they might be biased towards one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a body of experts from different political standings telling you similar things, or they could agree on one thing because they can't agree,
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't you listen to them? Or like, why wouldn't you do that? Like, I just think in general, we need to, in all levels of society, we need to be more scientifically minded. I mean,
Some
it's not like a cure all or like the perfect thing, but it at least standardizes stuff so that we could keep track of what's going on.
yeah. I think my response to that is that's a great point because I feel like from our walk of life, we're more science based. And we've seen that science has taken a backseat to almost everything right now. So to add to that, so it's not necessarily purely science, there needs to be a panel of just different different panels of different specializations. So like a panel of psychologists telling you the psychology of the laws you're gonna put into place. People on the science side telling you the scientific ramifications of things that you're gonna put into place economists telling you how the money's gonna affect people, and then they work together to tell you how each different thing affects each other. So then you have like a mind basically working together without just the greed and like looking away from everything and just doing what you think is right. Which I think there might be something like that into place, but I'm not sure. Not like bodies, but it's like people. And I think people is the problem. It can't just be one person telling you their story because of course it'll be biased.
Yeah. That kind of reminds me of back in the days when you had the king, and
Mm-hmm.
then he would have his senators
Mm-hmm.
telling him like, "Hey, you should do this or this or this. This is going to help the country or the
Mm-hmm.
kingdom flourish." But I guess even within that, there's room for politics to start to affect things
Yeah.
because you're going to have some experts who are going to be more respected than others. So
Mm-hmm.
then their opinion is going to have a bigger weight than other people.
Yeah.
So nothing is going to be perfect, but our
What
current system just isn't good, in my
what
opinion.
if it was like a almost unanimous advice from these experts?
If it's almost unanimous, then I would say sure, but then it's still a question of, well, is the person with the biggest influence impacting everybody else's choice?
Mm.
I mean, that's always going to be a potential issue.
Wait, I didn't mean unanimous. I meant anonymous.
Oh, like you can't tell who said what.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That could work too, as long as you verify beforehand that everybody is actually an
Well,
expert
I
on
mean, you
what.
have your experts, and then these experts give you anonymous advice on their specific fields.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that could work, but I still think that there's still room for politics.
Mm.
Like someone might go behind the scenes and talk to everybody, like get them on board with their view.
Yeah,
So
that's
then even if
always
they
gonna be
vote
there.
anonymous, yeah,
Yeah.
it's always going to be potential because humans, that's just human nature.
Dude, this is making me think of my one thing in life I don't like. Well, it's one of many things, reality TV. Because it's used to portray us in a bad way mostly. But then there's certain shows I look at in reality TV that actually bring forth human nature and human interactions. Because there's a show called The Challenge that is people from different reality TV shows competing against each other in like physical activities. But normally the winner of these shows isn't the one that's the most physical or the most able to do the task. It's actually the one that can get everybody to be on their side and not vote them out. So it's like
Hmm.
you can be good in the challenge part where you're doing the athletic stuff, but then you also have to be good in the house to get everybody to not vote for you. And that's what you said made me think about. So like even though you have anonymous offering of information, you can still go behind the scenes and try to sway people with whatever they need and try to like, bribe them or whatever.
Yeah. Do you? So somebody said something in chat. I don't know if you want to speak on it. But if you're not going to speak on it, I want to say something else.
Um, I've always felt like that would be a good idea because, as I said, science, at least in my opinion, has taken a back burner. Well, not saying that it needs to be in the forefront, but there are scientific issues that I feel aren't being looked at with the right spectacles because of who's looking at it.
Yeah, I would say my only contention to what they said in chat is that I do think that it would be ideal, or maybe not ideal, but it would be good. But the problem is the money. So in politics, that's the reason why it's usually only been rich people being able to get into office is because it requires so much money. And you need to be able to gather money from people, and it's usually easier to gather money from other rich people. And the only way to gather money from rich people is usually to be in their circles already.
Hmm.
So it's very unlikely for us to have just a regular mm, rocket scientist or whatever in office.
Yeah.
So
But I feel like
that's the only
even
problem.
if they were to get into office, there would be so much that they would have to know besides rocket science.
That's true.
Yeah. So
Like that's why I kind of like Obama was a lawyer, so he understood the law and stuff like that, at least in his state.
mhm.
Um, but I feel like every president should have some kind of experience with something
Mm-hmm.
related to society. Like an economist would potentially make a good president, for example.
Mm-hmm.
A lawyer. Like I don't see a doctor being necessarily a good president because I mean, unless maybe a public health person may be a good president,
Mm-hmm.
but like actual MD, maybe not, because public health is more of a population-based science, whereas MD is more of an individual-based thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I can see certain scientific fields being good presidential candidates, but I don't necessarily think just because you have a scientific background, you would be a good candidate, simply because of what you just said.
Yeah. Wow. This was
Um,
this was one of our. It was actually, I had a fear of it being too dark, but we actually thread the needle pretty well here.
yeah, I feel like we've been doing pretty good, and this is the after show right now.
Yeah.
I feel like we've actually been doing very well about not being negative,
Mm-hmm.
just speaking negativity into the world. I think partly because we try and think of solutions for things. Like
Yeah.
we're not just like pointing out, like we're not just playing the victim the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're like, okay, this is an issue,
Mm-hmm.
and this is how we could potentially fix it.
Yeah.
And I think, generally speaking, people should do that more often.
Yeah.
Especially like if somebody else gives an idea and you disagree,
Mm-hmm.
not only mention why you disagree or that you disagree,
Yeah.
but offer up a solution of your own.
Most people
And that would
they
lead,
don't do that.
yeah,
And even when you like, if you don't ask for a solution, then it's fine to not get one. But usually when someone tells me a problem, I ask them like, okay, then what do you think would be better, or what do you suggest instead? And then it's like they just say say never mind, or they don't want to continue the conversation anymore. They just don't have one. And it's like
yeah.
it doesn't really make sense to come forward with a problem if you don't have like a solution or anything else to give instead of it.
Or even if you come forward with a problem and you don't have a solution, maybe that's fine. Maybe you just haven't thought of one.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody else is giving you a solution, maybe not, don't knock it down.
Yeah.
Like maybe use it to prompt you to think of a solution instead. Like, okay, this solution doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let me try and think of one because maybe you sharing the problem with them, they don't understand the problem well enough to come up with a solution.
Yeah.
And that's why you should be the one to come up with a solution because you're the one who even identified the problem in the first place or
Yeah.
recognized it. So
Communication is very complex.
yeah. Thanks you God for the Tower of Babel. Had to make us learn different languages.
Oh
Cheese on
man.
bread.
Um, I agree with the last statement made in chat. There's not a lot of variety and representation.
Yep, I agree too.
Yeah.
How do we fix this though? I think overall we need to overhaul our entire like system. Like I
Mm-hmm.
like the idea of the three different branches,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we need to amend it or augment it
Mm,
in some ways. Like the Senate is probably fine how it is. Like they just basically make the laws.
yeah.
I think the way to augment that would be to make it a requirement that they reference a body of professionals as they make the laws. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe they have better understanding of the laws and stuff like that. That's fair. But maybe they don't have economics backgrounds. They don't
Yeah.
have public health backgrounds. They
Yeah.
don't have pharmaceutical, like they don't know enough. And it's impossible for them to know everything.
But what about I feel like currently what they know is probably outdated as well because they've been in there for like 160 years. So it's like
And they are old.
how is something that happened in the 1700s gonna help us now?
Right. Where they used
Like
to believe people
you've been serving since the sign of Declaration of Independence. Like there's no reason for you to still be there right now.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
we need people. Well, it depends. Like we need people that are currently the the majority of like working people to be representing us. I believe.
yeah.
Maybe
We need educated people to represent us.
currently educated people, like more
Yeah,
modern.
currently educated.
Yeah.
For the judicial system, we definitely need to. I agree with what is said in chat there too. People shouldn't be in there for life. They should be on a term just like every other branch of the government.
Hmm.
Because what happens if you have for example, a person who's sympathetic towards racists or a person who's sympathetic towards rapists or whatever or pedophiles, and they're in there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I actually trust the judicial system the most in terms of the rigorousness that they vet their people,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to pass the bar, you have to serve as a lawyer for X amount of years before you can even become a judge. Like
Mm-hmm.
they actually have a process that makes more sense
Mm-hmm.
compared to the other branches. But even within their thing, they still have like issues. So I do think that cutting that sentencing down would help a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, the term down would help a lot. And then for presidency, I don't know. Presidency, I think what I suggested before would probably work, where
Mm.
they have a body to just like tell them like, hey, this is something that you think we should do or whatever.
Yeah.
But the president don't actually make laws. I don't think people realize that. The president is not the one who makes the laws.
Yeah. The only thing that they can do is like an executive order, but that's usually just something that's like on the extreme, like they have to do right now.
Yeah, usually federal, I mean, I don't really understand executive orders, but my understanding, based on my limited understanding, is that it's more like things that are like federal level stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like stuff that's going to affect necessarily like individual states per se.
Yeah. Whew. All
But
right.
yeah, now how does this all relate to slavery? Or how does this all relate to the book?
Oh, well, it wouldn't. This is a rabbit hole now.
Yeah,
But
we went down that
yeah,
one.
yeah. But this book actually made me think a lot about current things that are happening today. So I feel like if an author can do that from back then to now and bridge the gap, it's really good. So we
Yeah,
actually started reading another book of her body of work.
yeah, it's called Xenogenesis.
Mhm.
This one is also very deep,
Yeah,
but we're not gonna go into it now. That's gonna be another podcast potentially.
yeah, probably.
But as I said, all her books are really good. Like
Hmm.
I've never read one of her books and didn't think like, damn, like I need to like this made me think about some stuff, you
Yeah.
know?
Hmm.
And it's weird because it's science fiction and you don't usually expect that from science fiction.
Yeah. I think she called it something else though, but I have to get into it and see what she actually called it. It's like a grim fantasy, she called this book.
Mm.
Yeah.
All
All
right,
right.
let's go to chat, see if anybody have any questions that we missed, and then maybe
I
we can
think
wrap it up.
they've just been adding on to things said before.
Okay.
And I think that's about it. So this has been Rabbit Hole Roundtable Talks, the show where we just talk and we go down rabbit holes. I've been joined by my co-host Mino. We'll be back in 2 weeks, hopefully with a guest that we can find. Hopefully somebody fun and entertaining. We usually do.
Yeah. And as I don't know if we have our business email in the description. But if you guys would like to appear on the show, if you're a professional in a given field, we don't just want a random schmo on the show. But if you're a professional in a field, if you have experience on a topic, like specialized experience, where you've done it professionally, or you just had enough experience where you could be seen as a professional, uh, feel free to email us, or if you ever have Q&As that you want to ask us questions about anything in specific, feel free to use a business email us. We do check it. Well, I don't check it. Maybe Wanted does.
I do.
um, just send us an email if you want to be on the show, and we'll vet you and see if you would make it be a good fit. So
All
we
right,
really like
guys.
interacting with our audience. So yeah,
Hope you guys have a great 2 weeks and we'll see you then.
yes, sir.
Peace out.